Hi everyone, and welcome to the Ispring webinar series, where every week we talk about e-learning trends, share Ispring tips and tricks, and cover clients' cases. Seems like everyone is here and we are ready to start. I'm Alice Persson, the Customer Success Manager at Ispring Solutions, and I and my colleague Larissa Smith will be the moderators for today's webinar. Our webinar today is dedicated to tips and tricks about online training. And to understand the topic, we've invited Susan Lucas, the owner and founder of Able HR Lady. Hi, Susan. How are you today?
I am mostly good, but I am super good to be here.
Nice to have you here. Thank you for being with us today.
So glad we had a few technical issues today, so I'm really happy that that you can see. And I said I was mostly good instead of saying great, which I normally say is great. The reason why I'm mostly good is I had a dentist appointment this morning, and it was 3 hours ago, and my lip is still numb. So I'm going to try not to spit on you guys. This is when you're the one time you're thankful that it's an online training instead of an in-person training. So we're gonna get going on this. And Alice has been through this, and here we go. We have all been to terrible training sessions like this one. I love finding things on TikTok because you can always find something that demonstrates what you're talking about. When you have terrible training sessions where the trainer doesn't want to be there, the people don't want to be there, nobody wants to be there, it's boring, it's long, it's awful, right? You've all done that, whether in person, online, or on demand. Everyone's had that. We're going to solve that problem. We're never going to have a terrible training session again. Promise. You don't want to have boring videos that you want to fast forward. And you've all done this when you've gone through training where it's like, okay, if I can just jump ahead, then I can get to the next slide. This is not what you want in a training. If you yourself watching this would be like, oh, I just want to speed through it, you need to fix your video. The thing is that it used to take a lot of skill and be very expensive to have interesting video. Today, just about anybody can learn how to do videos that will help your employees and that are interesting, especially with your younger employees that do spend all day on TikTok. They're used to interesting things. So we don't want to have boring videos that everybody wants to pass forward. And heaven knows we've all had those videos where there are stupid quizzes and the answers are obvious. I know that I have taken them, sexual harassment training or a racial discrimination training, and they literally have questions like this. If you are doing a training where everyone could answer all the questions correctly without doing the training, then the training isn't worth doing. If people are not learning new things, and you may say, well, we're doing this training because the law requires that we do this, or company policy requires that we do this, that every year everybody goes through sexual harassment training. Well, you need to make it worth their while. Otherwise, just send out a quiz with the stupid questions, let everybody take it, and you're done with things. You don't want to do that. You want to have something where they walk away saying, I have learned something. There is something that I can take from this and apply it in my day-to-day. And if they can't do that, it's not an effective training. There are trainers or moderators that would be better used to torture prisoners. And there's a clip from Ferris Bueller's Day Off, which tells you my age. But All right, I'm going to stop that after 26 seconds because it's so boring. It's so boring. And yet we've all been there. We've been to those trainings where we're just like, oh, can we get through them? And that's what I want to help you avoid. We can fix bad training. This is something that we have the capability, and you may say, but Suzanne, I'm not a natural trainer, or the topics I have to train on are so boring. I want to tell you, I used to be a trainer for SAP HR. There cannot be a more boring topic. It's so boring, but we found a way to make it interactive and exciting and help purvey knowledge to people. We're going to do that. We are going to fix bad training. So first, you need to know what makes a good training session and what makes a bad one. And you can say in general terms, a good training session is just one that's interesting. But how do you figure out what that is? And there are 5 things that I want to talk about as being good. The first is that it's needs-based. Is this something that the employee feels like they need to know? This can be why some of those sexual harassment, racial discrimination trainings are so boring, because they don't feel like they need to know it because they already know it. And when you have quizzes afterwards that ask really dumb questions like, should you use racial slurs at work? It just reinforces in the employee's brain that this is not something that they need to know. So the first thing you need to do is make it needs-based. This needs to be something that they need to know. And when do they need to know it? It needs to be immediately relevant. A lot of companies, when they implement new software, if it's a complicated software that takes a long time to implement, and you've got your consultants in building things or whatever, they'll give the training before the software is uploaded. And then by the time people get to it, they've forgotten all of their training. That's a waste of their time and a waste of your time. You can't really expect people to take notes and remember how to use something when you give the training and they have to wait 6 weeks until it's live. You want to make sure that any training you do is something that they can apply immediately. And this is one of those things that makes training on demand so helpful, because sometimes people are in different stages, and the new hire may not be ready until she's learned 3 different things, and now she's ready for this 4th thing where you're going to do this training. And having that on demand makes a lot more sense than saying, we do this once a month regardless of where you are, or worse, we do this once every 6 months regardless of where you are. So if you're new, you have to wait 6 months to get the training, or if you happen to be hired right before the training is scheduled, then you're not prepared for it. This is something that an on-demand training can really fix. Then everybody can be needs-based and immediately relevant. The next thing that makes a training session good is that it is adaptable. Different employees, different responsibilities, different situations. You want to make sure that your training is adaptable to the person's needs. And this is something that we see a lot of in bad training, where somebody in corporate will make a training video, write a training schedule, whatever, for their people. And then it's rolled out to people all around the world that have different cultures, different problems, different everything, different jobs. And they wonder why it's not working well for everybody. That's because it's not adaptable. You need to be able to adapt things to different people. And again, training on demand, you can put in different things for different people and make that a better thing. The next thing you need is realistic assessment metrics. You don't want a stupid quiz at the end that doesn't demonstrate if anybody's learned anything. Everybody could get that question that we don't use racial slurs at work right without even taking my racial discrimination training. You don't need to go through it to know that. If you're doing assessments that are based on things people knew before. It's not telling you how your training is. Assessments that just take place as soon as you take the training is also not talking about how effective the training is. It's talking about how effective short-term memory recall is. And that's a very different thing. Anybody can remember anything for a short period of time. What you want to know is, does this training make a difference? Do they remember it later? Does it increase productivity on whatever it is that you were training on? There's so many different things that you'll have to sit down and think. And the question you want to ask yourself is, why are we doing this training and how will we know if it's a success? If you cannot answer how will we know if it's a success, then you have to sit back and evaluate, do we need this training? And if you can't come up with realistic assessment metrics, you may not need it. Maybe it's not something that you need to do. Maybe you should focus elsewhere. But if there's something that you can see, oh, there will be an improvement, then yes. Keeping in mind that sometimes trainings are just required by a government. But other than that, you need these realistic assessment metrics. And of course, you want engagement. Of course, the easiest way to do engagement is an in-person live training with a dynamic trainer, and that is the gold standard. It's not realistic in today's world, and it's also incredibly expensive, especially when you need to train a whole bunch of people. Having an on-demand or online training where people can come together like this one, which is both on-demand and online here, that right now you guys are getting it live, but then the people that might listen to it later, they'll be sad because they're not live, but they'll still get some good engagement. But you need a way also for your on-demand training to have people be able to ask questions. Maybe they don't get an answer immediately, but they can get one later. And you want to make sure that it's interesting enough that they are focused on what's going on. You don't want anybody hitting fast forward to get through things. Bad training sessions. When you have a checklist style trainer who puts just bullet points on a PowerPoint slide and reads them, just like I'm doing. Haha, this is good training because I'm enthusiastic and engaging. But you guys all know what checklist style training is, where they're just going through the motions. We'll get this down. We'll get this down. Things when they'll say you'll need this later. This is not what you want for training. Training should be, you'll need this now or in the very near future. You'll need this later. They're turning off their brains. They're focusing on the things that they need to do right now. People have different spheres of things that they're concerned about. The urgent and important, the urgent and unimportant. And that's what you don't want, is urgent and unimportant. And if this is a training that you don't need now, you're going to put it in that urgent but unimportant box, and you're going to be annoyed that your manager made you go to it. And for those of you that are creating the trainings and giving these trainings, you don't want a bunch of people taking your training who are annoyed. This is why it's so important to have it be something that they need now. Next thing for bad training is everyone gets the same information. Now, of course, there are some same information. If you're doing technical training, this is just how the software works. Everybody needs that information. But you want to make sure that it's applicable to the different things that people are doing. So that same information may be delivered slightly different with different examples depending on what people's jobs are. And of course, this is always easier to do in a live presentation because people can ask questions and we can vary things from time to time. But you can also have some variation in your on-demand training. You definitely want your assessments related to the behavior. And of course, you don't want to have that horrible, boring, no engagement kind of presentation. Now, Ispring Suite has some really cool things, and everybody I know is familiar with PowerPoint. It is how you build presentations. Fortunately, with Ispring, you can just take those presentations and put them into Ispring and help to create your courses. And you can add your videos and quizzes and all of these things that help make it interactive. These are the types of things that can help you do and take your mad PowerPoint skills, put them to use and expand them through this program. Ispring has this full set of e-learning tools. I'm going to blame that mispronunciation on my numb lip. That can really bring out the best and make your content engaging. The engagement, when you need that back and forth, like I said, the best is when you're face to face, but that's not practical. So being able to have some tools to go back and forth within that can help increase engagement. And when employees have increased engagement, they have increased retention. And of course, they have the content distribution mechanisms that can help share things out with people. Very important aspects of online learning. Now, let's talk in depth about needs-based training. And this is a magic question that I always ask clients when they ask me to come do a training is, what problem is it that you are trying to solve? And this is a magic question in so many situations. Oftentimes within human resources departments or learning and development departments, you'll have a manager that will come in and say, I need you to train my employees on how to clock in. And you say, it is not that difficult. Why do we need a training? And they'll say, because they're not doing it right. The better question is, what problem is it that you are trying to solve? And if you ask the manager this question, and don't let them get away with a weaselly answer like, oh, I don't know, we have some people not coming in on time. Okay, maybe not coming in on time is a different question than not clocking in correctly. Ask this question, what problem is it that you're trying to solve? A manager comes to you and says, we need to have sexual harassment training. And you say, okay, and you pull out your old sexual harassment training, or you say, what problem is it that you are trying to solve? And if you can get the answer to that question, you can tailor the training or direct to a previously made on-demand training that deals with that specific problem. And that can really make a difference. If you just go on your assumptions on what the person said with their first thing, oh, we need training. You go, okay, here you go. I have this thing. If you ask this question, what problem is it that you are trying to solve? Sometimes, and I who love to do training and would do it all day, every day, the answer is you don't need a training. You need a one-on-one conversation with somebody. And so you don't want to spend your time creating this long training when really it's one person with a problem that they need to address as a manager, and they're trying to push it off on HR or learning and development. So ask this magic question. Anytime you're going to do a training, no matter who tells you it needs to be done, what problem is it that you are trying to solve? And then your training is focused around that idea. We are trying to solve this problem. Okay, so now we can build our training. And maybe the thing is we're trying to solve these 5 problems. Or we need to solve these 3 problems from our Belgium office, these 2 problems from our Paris office, and our New York office has all 5 problems. Okay, so let's take and make it an interactive, adaptable, on-demand training. So with different modules so that each group can take what they need and not have to deal with a whole different amount of time that they don't need. Because remember, you want to keep it needs-based. If employees feel like they are learning from things and that are getting better, they're going to be excited about the training. If it's not needs-based, if it's not something that they can see, oh, this is how it helps me be better at my job or helps me to have a better workspace environment, then they're not going to pay attention to the training. They're going to go through it because they have to go through it. Make sure you keep it needs-based and ask that magic question. With this immediately relevant concept, this is so important. And so many companies skip over it. They don't focus on that. They have their calendar, and by golly, this is when you're going to take it. It's not relevant. You want to make sure that the employees not only have a problem that the training is going to solve, but it's going to solve it now. This is how you're going to get working together. It's very, very critical for that for the employees to want to be there and to understand it. If they don't want to be there, especially on an online training, it is so easy for you to sit there with your computer on in front of you while a video is playing and you're on Facebook, or you have the volume turned down on your computer because you're watching TikToks or whatever you're doing. You don't want that. And that's what'll happen if it is not immediately relevant. When you're thinking about adaptable, I know I've talked about this a lot, but it's really very important. The basic thing, if you don't make engineers do basic math problems, it's just not relevant to them. They will be annoyed that you're having them do that. You don't have your senior marketing people do the same trainings that your junior marketing people are doing. If it's, marketing based training, you need to make sure that it is adaptable, appropriate for different countries, different groups, different ideas. And you can have different modules that work together, and people can pick and choose, or you pick and choose what they need to do to make sure that everyone has this opportunity to really learn and get the information that they need. One of these things is the world gets smaller because of technology, and we can have coworkers from all over. I sit in Switzerland. Most of my clients are in the US. Ispring is in the Netherlands. The woman who designed my slides is in Brazil. We're super global. Everything about this presentation is global. But don't think that just because you can all talk together that everybody's coming with the same culture and the same backgrounds. There's going to be things that different people understand differently. So make sure that your training is something that's going to apply to the people that are seeing it. That might mean making a few different sets of slides to make things really adaptable and interesting to everybody. Now let's talk about metrics. I am a firm believer that you should not ask questions if you don't want the answer to them. And that may seem like a silly, obvious thing, but this is something that I see all of the time. That people will, after training, they will give an evaluation and have the employees fill it out, or a quiz and have them fill it out, or follow up 6 months later. You get the results and you stick them in a file on your computer and you never do anything about it. If you're going to do that, don't bother to do the assessments, because what good is it? You're asking employees to take their time to do an assessment and you're not using it to make your training better. You want to make sure that you're measuring what you think you're measuring. You're asking the questions that will demonstrate whether your training was effective or not. And again, this goes back to that magic question of what problem is it that you are trying to solve? And if your assessment can't measure that, then you need to go back to the drawing board. You want to make sure that you are measuring what you think you're measuring. And there's two different types of assessment after a training. One is how this actually impacts the day-to-day. How does this impact your employees? Is their data entry more accurate after this? Training is there, are the sales going up after you had this sales training? Are harassment cases coming down after you had that? There's that kind of assessment. And those are long-term things. You won't expect to do a sales training on Monday and then on Tuesday, suddenly sales are up by 50%. You won't expect to see that. You'll need to be long-term and pay attention. You can even compare the people that went through the training and the people that didn't to kind of suss out, was the training effective or is there something else that's leading to it? Sometimes you may find out that your training was terrible and there was no long-term impact, there was no positive long-term impact. and it was a waste of everyone's time. And in that case, you have options. Option 1 is you can cry and be really sad. Option 2 is you can say, we're never going to do training again. And option 3 is you can take and learn from your mistakes and do it better the next time. Oftentimes people pick 1 and 2. Or actually, sometimes they pick 4, which is to say, oh, well, this must be stupid employees. I'm just going to keep doing the same training over again. That is the worst. You're going to do assessments. You're going to look at your data, and then you're going to go back and change. If it's not how you wanted it to be, then you're going to go back and change it for the next round. It's okay to change your training. If it's not getting you the results that you want to get, it's okay to change it. It's okay to go back to the managers and say, look, this is not having this impact. Let's talk about what you really need, and maybe do a needs assessment. And that formal needs assessment can change how you approach your training. And we're going to talk about that in a little bit more. But keep this in mind. I love data because data helps us be better. And so you can take a look at your training and see, did it make an impact? Did it make a positive impact? How did it make a positive impact? You can also ask for feedback about the training itself. Ask the question, did you fast forward through the videos? If that answer is yes, not that people will tell you, but theoretically that they would, or if you can monitor if they did or not, then you'll say, you know what, the problem is my videos are not working because they still got the quizzes right, or they got all the quizzes wrong. Whatever you need to do, pay attention to that data and be willing to make changes. And again, if it's not interesting, you're wasting your time. And I don't mean that you have to have balloons and clowns and whatever. I don't know. Maybe clowns are not so interesting because they're terrifying. But if it's not interesting to the employee, they're not going to pay attention. If they're not going to pay attention, they're not going to learn anything. And if they don't learn anything, then why did you just spend all of this time developing a training? It has to be interesting. Even back in the day when, as I said, I was training people on SAP HR, which is the most boring thing ever, and SAP will never hire me again because it was so boring. I didn't work for SAP, but anyway, just making it clear that they never hired me in the first place. But I was working for another company. It was boring, but we made it interesting because we did interaction. We did things that they could take and apply that day, that when they went back to their desks in the afternoon, they could apply it that day. It was interesting engagement. That's what you have to do. If it's not interesting, they will not pay attention. Even if they're there, they won't pay attention. You have to do this. And I cannot emphasize how important this engagement is. Your content can actually be slightly worse if your engagement is high because they're paying attention. Of course, the best thing for getting high engagement is good content. And now we're going to talk a little bit about how HR and learning and development can work together to make training engaging and relevant. And as I said, we have many, many opportunities in HR where people come to you and say, I have this problem. And you're going to answer the question and you're going to work together to assess needs. And you can ask that magic question of the manager, what problem is it that you're trying to solve? And they will give you an answer, but it may not be the correct answer. And sometimes, and I know this is shocking, but sometimes it's the manager who's the problem, right? So the manager comes in and says, we need to do a training on this software because my employees can't do it right. And you just take the manager's word for it and say, okay, and then you build it all up and you present it and the numbers don't increase. Well, come to find out that the problem is really that the manager doesn't know how to manage. So you want to make sure that before you go to the extent of building a training with HR on one side and learning development on the other, and a lot of companies, that's the same person. So you're just wearing your different hats. You want to do an actual needs assessment. If you're an on-site business, go down to that department, talk with people, observe how the manager's interacting with the employees. Ask if you can sit down next to somebody who's doing the job and look over their shoulders just to see. And please ask, don't just do it. You might say, well, that's my job to just do it. And they'll say yes because they'll feel like they have to anyway, but ask because it lets employees feel valued, that you care about their opinion, and actually assess those needs. And by having learning and development and HR work together, if you're two separate people or just with your both hats on, if it's just you, you can really see the different things coming together on what we need to do. And sometimes that needs assessment may take longer than actually putting together the training, which is fine because you're trying to solve a problem. When you can work together, don't just take one person's word for what the problem is that you're trying to fix. Sit down, evaluate, figure out where the real problems are, and then figure out the training that will fix that problem. Once you've figured out the training that you believe will fix that problem, you need to make sure that you have your assessments in place to be able to collect data to tell you if that worked. If you're going to drop that last part, you'll never get better. And your employees will never get better because it is possible that you have a flop training. It's, I know, strange, but it is possible. But you won't know if you're not doing those assessments together. You want to set your training around those good characteristics that we talked about. You want it to be timely. You want it to be engaging. You want to have it solve problems. If you can do that, it brings things together. And this is where those skill sets of learning and development that have had, all of these courses and experience on curriculum building and all of that can really help you to come together and to set good training. And it is worth it to take that time to build the good training. If you do things too rapidly just to get it out the door, then you've got a problem. Now, of course, sometimes I'm speaking in a dream world where we all have time and money and all of that to build the perfect training. Okay, got it, that's not your reality. Your reality is you have employees onboarding next week and you need to get this up and running, or this new software system is going live next week and I need to get this up and running. Sometimes you're not going to have a great amount of time to do needs assessments and evaluations and all of that. But for the things that you do, your annual, for example, code of conduct training, you have plenty of time in those 365 days to make it better next time around. And this is perfect training for an on-demand training, a code of conduct or a sexual harassment or anything like that everyone's going to have to take. And you can have it staggered and you can have assessments ongoing and you can build the training around the good characteristics as you go. The first one may not be perfect, but by the time that person wraps around and has to take it again the next year, the training has changed in response to the feedback that you're getting. Now, one caution on that is sometimes people get that feedback and they say, okay, this is perfect. We're going to leave it like this forever and ever. Amen. I just want you to think back 2 years. 2.5 years when COVID-19 first started. And if you had made a training video or training, on-demand training for your employees on how to handle COVID-19 in February of 2020 and never changed it to today, how relevant would it be today? And this is something that we can all see because we all watched as governments made different decisions and guidelines changed and this changed and vaccines happened and boosters happened and all of this stuff happened. Travel changes, all this stuff. Just because your training was effective in February, March of 2020 doesn't mean that same training is going to be effective in June of 2020 and definitely not in June of 2022. Things change and you need to make sure that your training is brought up to date. You need to do regular assessments of training to make sure that things are still how they were. This can also happen internally. You get new managers with new management styles. You have new product lines. You have a new organizational structure, whatever it is. You want to pay attention to that as you're building your training around the good characteristics. And this is really why it's so important to have your learning and development people and your HR people working together with managers to come to the right decisions on how to help your employees be the best that they can be, because that's the purpose of training, right? We're not doing training because it's super fun, although it is super fun, but we're not doing it just because Suzanne likes to give training. It is to help employees do better. It is to help your company be compliant with laws. It is to help everybody be a better person. And when you set your training around those good characteristics that we've talked about in depth, that can really make a huge difference. For HR, sometimes HR likes to take over. If you're wearing both those hats yourself, then hey, you are the development and creation expert. If you're in a business where there's somebody else different in that role, step back a bit if you're the HR person. And if you're the learning and development person, step forward a bit. This is what you do. You create things to help people learn and grow. Make sure that you are stepping forward to do that, and that we can also have our HR people step back. Sorry. I just had my cat come and try to take over my presentation. Apologies. This is the hazard of working from home. Let people that are experts, that are trained, give their input. Of course, HR can say, hey, wait a minute, what about this? Of course, the manager can say, hey, what about this? But if you have an expert on staff, don't ignore that expert. And the expert, don't be shy. Speak up. Say, this is why I'm doing it this way. This is why we introduced and then we revisited. And then we're going to wrap up again, because this helps cement it in people's brains when they hear it 3 times. Say that. Let people know what it is, why you're doing it. When you say, this is why we're having the same information in video and text form, because some people like video and some people like text. Now, this whole learning styles thing is currently considered kind of a bunch of bunk, but it doesn't erase reality that people have preferences. And so your learning and development person may be able to help you guide through what you want to do with that. And for on-demand training, this is something that can really make a difference in flexibility. One of the things that employees are looking for right now is flexibility. And this flexibility can make a real difference. You can ask people to, everybody drop what you're doing, come right now. Now is the only time. If you don't show up, we're writing you up, or whatever it is you do. Flexibility says, okay, I understand that your job is important, your family is important, your friends are important, whatever it is that you're doing is important. So you're going to be able to set this in around your schedule. Now, of course, that means they should be doing it when they're on the clock. We don't make people take trainings on the weekends, and we certainly don't say, oh, you shouldn't be paid for this training, it's a weekend thing. No, you want to have that available for them to do while they are at work. with an on-demand training, especially if you have a retail or a factory environment or something like that, where it's impractical to take everybody off into a training room, and it's certainly impractical to have a trainer come in and train everybody individually, and you certainly don't want them to come in at 3 a.m. to do it. This on-demand flexible training, you can say, all right, today this person is going to go take this training for 2 hours, and when she gets back, someone else will take it. And that way you're not losing people off of your floor. But it gives people to have that time, and they can build a real difference. That can make a real difference to people. Keep in mind that not everyone's schedule has room right now. Eventually everybody will be able to fit it in, but right now it is super busy season for the people that run amusement parks. It is end of June. Amusement parks are going crazy. Everybody is working. You don't really want to pull in all your executives and say, and now it's time for training about doing annual employee reviews. They're going to look at you like you're crazy. They're like, I am working 60 hours a week and you want me to do a training on annual reviews? You're nuts. But by having flexibility, they can then take that training in October when the amusement park is shutting down and be able to do that then. Or they do it right before you open in the spring. You can set everything on different things. You can have one department is really busy right now, so they're going to not do that training right now, but this other department is having a downtime. This gives you, as the HR, as the learning development, as the trainer, the ability to make the trainings when you have the time, and them have the ability to take the trainings when they have the time. And that is very important. If you can create creative, engaging content that they can put to use as soon as they take it as well, then they won't avoid it. Sometimes people avoid training. I know it, you know it. You have to drag them in kicking and screaming. But if you have content that they can actually use, there's less kicking and screaming. There will always be some kicking and screaming because there are always some people that think that they don't need training for anything. They are wrong, but those people exist. You've all dealt with them, but you can do that and have that for you. Another advantage of online on-demand training is that an employee can take it more than once. And you can make sure you're set up that way that they can take it more than once. So if the information is complex, they can review it and go through the training again. And this can be really important for technical training. Oftentimes, if you're learning a new system, you learn how to do things, but you don't even know what questions to ask because you haven't been building on it. Give them the opportunity to come back and redo it if they need to, or to be able to review different parts. This can be really helpful with complex situations, complex trainings. One more video about onboarding. You're going to be stupid. You better be taught. There you go. Many managers hate onboarding processes that HR wants to implement, and they think it's a waste of time, and they think it's stupid, and that's why I like this video. If you don't onboard your employees, you're going to have a lot of problems. Keep in mind, for onboarding, the first day of work is overwhelming for everybody, whether you're hiring a new entry-level person or you're hiring a new CEO. That first day of work is overwhelming. When you put all of the new hires together in a room, it doesn't really make them feel part of the team, especially when your new hires are going to be working in different areas. These are not people that they're going to see every day necessarily. And even if they are, these aren't the people that can help them because they're all new. So if you can implement some of your training to be on demand, they can take it in their workspace. And after they've met some of their coworkers as part of a formal onboarding process. And remember, the point of onboarding is to make the person feel part of a team. And yes, we all say, oh, well, we want to hire people that can hit the ground running. And that is so dumb because nobody can do that. Because while you may be an expert in your field, you're not an expert in the systems, the culture, the whatever from this company that you're new at. So this onboarding is to help them feel like part of the team and to not be overwhelmed. So make sure that when you're doing your onboarding, you want to get these people integrated, and that on-demand onboarding training can really help with that. Is it necessary that you walk through every bit of how the company party works? No, it's not. Give them a chance to get through that. Give them a chance to integrate. You do need to have management buy-in. A lot of managers will say, no, look, you take them for the first 2 days, train them on everything that they need to know, and then send them to work. As we know, there are problems with that, including they're going to learn stuff that they don't need to know now, and it's going to be completely overwhelming, and they're going to say, none of that's going to stick in their ears, and it won't help. So you want to get managers on board to spread out some of that onboarding training, to integrate them into it, and to help them become part of the team. Because when people feel like they are part of the team, then they're less likely to turn over. And when they're less likely to turn over, that saves the company a lot of money, and it saves a lot of headaches. And really good training can do that. Can all types of training be done on demand? I don't know. I certainly learned to do on demand training and online training a lot during the past 2 years when suddenly the world shut down. Face-to-face is still the gold standard, though. I think it always will be. But on demand allows everyone to receive training at their own time, and it relieves pressure on you. And that is very important because it also allows you to do more of the stuff that will make the company better. And it relieves that pressure on learning and development and HR. So thank you so much for listening to me talk about training. And if you have some questions, I'm happy to hear them.
Susan, I really love the way your presentation is built. I mean, the videos that you're using and other things reminded me of the things that we had at Ispring too. Because when we were trained, well, I am not a technical person, I'm the customer success manager. So when we were trained about the technical releases of our recent, product releases, we used to be trained by PDF instructions, like here is the instruction, go through it and learn the details about the recent release. But the conversion was very low. I mean, the people like me, they could not perceive the information in a good way. And when our customer product development team began making the courses with some GIFs and videos and funny interactions, even though the topic was very, very serious about the recent release, we began perceiving that information in the best way. So the same is proven in your presentation too. When you have some engagement things in the presentation, they work much better for people.
It absolutely does. And I see Christiana has a question on any tips for making software simulation e-learning more engaging. And some of that goes back to what you said. It's making things that they can do right then, and that they can receive feedback. That's another thing that people really like, is instantaneous feedback. And that's something you can definitely do with an e-learning platform.
All right. Seems like we don't have any other questions or comments left. Thank you everyone again for joining our webinar today. We hope it was helpful for you and that your online trainings will be running in accordance with the recommendations and the recent trends in e-learning industry. Again, we will be happy to send you the recording of today's webinar session via email. You can also watch it on our YouTube channel. Thank you everyone. Thank you, Susan. We hope you enjoyed it and we're wishing you a wonderful day.